Hello all and welcome back. In my previous video, I briefly mentioned about subtotal. In this video, I'm going to talk to you about subtotal much more in detail. Not only will I cover the subtotal function, but I'll also cover the subtotal feature. Wait, what? Are they different? Yes, they are different. In fact, the way they are written is also different. The subtotal function is written in capital letters, whereas the subtotal feature is written in sentence case. The subtotal feature lets you add subtotal rows and grand total rows to your data, thereby creating some sort of a summary report. Whereas the subtotal function, you can use it in the subtotal row to do basic calculations using common functions like sum, average, max, etc. Also, subtotal function is a very unique function because it can differentiate between visible and hidden cells. So let's delve more into the subtotal function and the subtotal feature. Here I have two sheets which have the same data. I will be working with the second sheet. The first sheet is there so that I can copy the data from here to sheet 2 every time I want to try something new. So if you go to the second sheet, you will notice that it's the same data. This is the very basic sample data from an e-commerce site. I will be using this data for demonstration on how to work with subtotal feature and the subtotal function in VBA. So let's start off with the subtotal function. The subtotal function returns a subtotal in a list or a database. The syntax of this function is subtotal, function num, ref1, ref2 and so on. Function num is a required parameter. It can have a value from either 1 to 11 or from 101 to 111. So if you look at the table below, 1 to 11, it includes manually hidden rows, whereas 101 to 111 excludes them. You can also use these for specific functions. For example, 1 is used for average, 4 is for max, 7 is for standard deviation and so on. Ref1 is a required parameter. It is the first named range or reference for which you want the subtotal. Ref2, Ref3, Ref4 and so on are optional. They are the named ranges or references 2 to 254 for which you want the subtotal. If I were to add subtotal function manually, then this is how I would do it. Let's add subtotal to total price in column G. So click on G12 and we'll start typing equal to sub. You can either type the entire name of the function or you can press the down arrow key to highlight the subtotal function and then press the tab key. Now let's try and get the sum of total price. For that, we can either use 9 or we can use 109. As I mentioned earlier, if you use the single digit number, then you will be including the hidden rows in your calculation. And if you use the triple digit codes, then the hidden rows are excluded. So I will type 9 and then select the range G2 to G11. I'll close the parenthesis and I'll press the enter key. And I get 18,582. Let's do one more thing. I'm going to copy this data from here and I'm going to paste it here. And then values. Because right now it has formulas. So it was copying formulas. I've converted that to values. Okay. Next, I will copy this formula and I will paste it here. So obviously both the values are same because this is a duplicate of this column. However, instead of 9, I will use 109. So let me quickly change this to 109 and I'll press enter. So right now both values are still same. Now I'm going to demonstrate how hidden rows affect the calculation. So let's hide row 6. I'm going to right click on row 6 and then I'm going to click on hide. See what happens. The total price for column G is 18,582. That remained unchanged. Here, the value now becomes 15,342. So what exactly happened here? This sum ignored the hidden rows. So So this is the difference between using the single digit number and the triple digit number. So I hope it is clear how to use the subtotal function. Now let's see how we can add a subtotal function using VBA. Let's launch the Visual Basic Editor by pressing the shortcut key Alt F11. If you're not sure what Visual Basic Editor is, then I recommend watching the video Visual Basic Editor and Introduction. Here I have 5 modules which we will use to demonstrate subtotal feature and the subtotal function in detail. Let's open the first module. You can either double click on this module or you can also right click on it and click on View Code. Here I have a procedure called Insert Subtotal Function. Here I have declared my worksheet and last row variable. Here I am initializing the worksheet to sheet 2. Next I am finding the last row using .find. If you're not sure how .find works, then I recommend watching the video Read Data from a Worksheet and Display in User Form. I've covered .find there in detail. Finally, we are inserting the formula in column G using .formula. Here I have last row plus 1, so my data is till row 11. So the formula will be inserted in the 12th row. Let's run this. But before that, let's go back and let's delete this data and let's unhide the rows. Let's go back. So let's run this. Let's go to the worksheet. We have a formula now in G12. Similarly, if you want to add a formula, say in cell F11 right next to it, and instead of sum, if you want to, let's say, calculate the average of the price per unit, then you can do that as well. So let's go back and let's uncomment the second line. I'm going to delete this as well. So both these cells will be updated with formulas. So I'm going to go back, I'm going to uncomment this and I'm going to run this. And there you go. We have now formulas here and here as well. So 1 is for average and 9 is for sum. Just like I used 109 for the sum, I can also use 101 for average in case I want to exclude the hidden rows. So if I delete this and if I go back and I change this to 101 and if I run this, right now it's showing 267. The moment I hide any row, the value will change. See, let's unhide this. Now let's understand how the subtotal feature works. I'm going to delete the formulas that we just added. Before I get into the VBA part of the subtotal feature, I will first take you through the visual interface of the subtotal feature. Click on the Data tab and then in the outline group, you will notice that there is something which is called subtotal here. To work with this feature, you'll have to select a cell in the range where you want to apply the subtotal. If you do not do that, and if you try to click on the subtotal feature, Excel will give you an error alert. Right now the selected cell is E14. So the moment I click on subtotal, Excel tells me this can't be applied to the selected range. Please select a single cell in a range and try again. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on OK. This time I'm going to click within the range of data. Now if I go ahead and if I click on it, I will get the subtotal feature. Okay, I'm going to close this for a moment. I would like to share that the data should have headers, because if there are no headers and Excel is unable to determine which row has a column header, then you will again get an error alert. Let's test this. I'm going to delete the first row. And now if I go and click on the subtotal, see what happens. Excel is not very happy with it. It's not able to find out the header row. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on OK and I am going to press Ctrl Z and I get my headers. Let me also share an important point before we use the subtotal feature. Before applying subtotals, the data must be sorted by the column or multiple columns on which you want to base the subtotals. The column or columns is usually the one where the data keeps repeating. For example, in this data we have a column called product category. Now, sorting is something that we can handle it via code. But remember, we have to sort the data before we use the subtotal feature. For explaining the different parts of subtotal dialog box, I'm going to sort the data. And then before we delve into the VBA code, I'm going to clear the sheet and copy the data from the raw sheet. To manually sort the data, highlight your range and then click on data and then click on sort. Since we have only one column where the fields are getting repeated, which is product category, so I'm only going to sort on product category. And I'm going to sort it on A to Z. So I'll click on OK. You will see that the product category now is sorted. So you have appliance, fashion and furniture. Now let's go ahead and let's click on the subtotal feature again. But before that, let's delete the column H. I had copied column G to column H for a particular demonstration. That is done now. So let's click on outline and subtotal. We will understand the different parts of this dialog box. This will help us when we are writing our VBA code. This section and this section gives you the names of the columns. This section which says at each change in, select the column that you want to base the subtotal on. So in our case, it will be product category. So I'm going to change that to product category because this is where we have different product categories where the rest of the product names are being classified under. Next, in the use function box, select the summary function that you want to use when totaling the columns. By default, you will see sum here. I will leave it as it is. In case you want to change it, you can. So if you click on this, there are other common functions like count, average, max, minimum, etc. You can choose whatever you want. Right now we will stick with sum. The next section is add subtotal to. Add a check mark to all the columns in which you want a subtotal. I'm going to select stock quantity and total price. Now let's understand the three checkboxes here. The first checkbox, replace current subtotals, gives you the option to add more than one subtotal to a table. If you check it, then it will replace the subtotal every time. And if you do not check it, then you will see all the subtotals that you supplied. For example, let's say you want to show the sum and the average total price. In that case, we will first apply the sum subtotal and then we will have to select the subtotal option again and then select the average function. I will demonstrate this in a short while. The second checkbox is page break between groups. If you check this checkbox, then Excel will insert page breaks in your spreadsheet after each group of data. This too I shall demonstrate in a short while. This option is usually useful when you are trying to print your worksheet. The third checkbox is summary below data. If the checkbox is checked, the subtotals are positioned below each data group, and if it is unchecked, the subtotals are positioned at the top of each data group. Finally, this button is to remove all subtotal in the selected range. So let's do a quick demonstration. I'm going to click on all the three checkboxes and then I'll click on the OK button. The data now shows a subtotal after each change in the product category column. Here we have a grand total at the bottom of the data. If you click on the cell which shows subtotal, you will see that it uses the subtotal function which we covered earlier. It is using the function 9 for sum. Also, if you click on the grand total, it includes the subtotal range. So if I double click on this, you will see that it is including from E2 to E13. Okay, this is by default. The moment you double click on it, it will always exclude the last subtotal. Even if you include it, it will not make a difference. See? If you remember, I shared an interesting fact about this subtotal function, that it can differentiate between the visible and the hidden cells? Let me share another interesting fact. This function also excludes any cell or cells which have the subtotal function. So here, it is only summing up cells which do not have the subtotal function. So it is only summing up this, and this cell. So if you look at the bottom, the sum is 131, which is being shown here. So it ignored this, and this value. These are the page breaks that we inserted. If you uncheck the checkbox page break between groups, then these will not be shown to you. At the top left, 3 grouping buttons have been added. I will talk about these grouping buttons in detail in my next video. You can use these to view specific parts of the data. The first one here will only show you the grand total. So if you click on this, it will only show you grand total. The second one will show you grand total and subtotals. And the third one will show you everything. You can also click on the plus and the minus buttons in the grouping bar to show or hide the sections of the data. These plus and minus buttons are also known as outline symbols. So you can click on these to show or hide sections of the data. Now let's test the remove all button in the subtotal. Ensure that any cell within the data is selected and then click on subtotal again. Now click on the remove all button. See how Excel removes all the subtotal? Now let's test the replace current subtotals, page break between groups, and then summary below data checkbox. So let's again click inside the data and let's click on subtotal. Let's uncheck all 3 of them and let's click on OK. Since summary below data was unchecked, the grand total now has moved to the top. Now we also do not see the page breaks because we unchecked the checkbox page break between groups. To see the effect of replace current subtotals, let's click on the subtotal feature again. This time I will select average. And then I'll select price per unit. And I'm going to uncheck the other 2. Let's click on OK. Now you will see all the subtotals that you applied. We have the average and we have the sum. This is because we did not check on the checkbox replace current subtotals, and hence Excel kept both the subtotals that you created. If you would have checked the checkbox replace current subtotals, then the sum subtotal would have been replaced by the average. This option is useful when you want to have different subtotals for different columns. So I hope the visual interface was clear enough. So now we will use the subtotal feature from VBA. Let's view the code in module 2. Before we begin, first let's understand how you can use range.subtotal method in VBA, which will create subtotals for the range. The syntax of range.subtotal method is expression.subtotal, group by, function, TotalList, replace, page breaks, summary below data. Expression is a variable that represents a range object. Group by is a required parameter. It is the field to group by as a 1-based integer offset. Function is also a required parameter. It can have any of these Excel consolidation function values. These are the same values which we saw in the function dropdown: sum, average, max, etc. TotalList is another required parameter. It is an array of 1-based field offsets indicating the fields to which the subtotals are added. Replace is an optional parameter. Set it to true to replace existing subtotals. The default value is true. Page breaks is also optional parameter. Set it to true to add page breaks after each group. The default value is false. Summary below data is also optional. This places the summary data relative to the subtotal. It can have any of the 2 Excel summary row values. If you choose Excel summary above, then the summary row will be positioned above the detail row in the outline. And if you choose Excel summary below, then the summary row will be positioned below the details of the outline. So now if I compare the syntax with the subtotal dialog box, you will easily understand which parameter tweaks which setting. Now let's go back to the code and let's understand what the code is doing. Here I have declared my variables for my worksheets, last row and range. Here I have initialized the worksheets. Here I am clearing any data in the working sheet so that I can copy the raw data from sheet 1 into sheet 2. And here I am copying the data. Here I am auto-fitting the data in the column. Here I am finding the last row. I could have used 11 as that is the last row. So if I go back to raw, this is the last row. I could have used this. But I am using .find here to find the last row in case you are not copying and have a dynamic data in the worksheet. So this last row will find the last row which has data in your worksheet. Here I am sorting the data on the third column, which is the product category. I have already explained how sorting works in my previous video. If you're not sure how sorting works, then do see the video working with tables in Microsoft Excel-VBA. We need to sort the data so that when the subtotal is applied, it is as per the category. Here I am setting my range. Finally, I am applying the subtotal. Let me do a quick visual comparison. Group by is 3 here, which is the third column, product category. Function is sum. We are going to create a subtotal using sum. TotalList is the columns where you want to apply the subtotal. Currently, we want to apply it at 5th and 7th column. If you wanted to apply it on the 2nd, 5th and the 7th column, then we would have used array 2, 5, 7. Later in this video, I will explain how to generate this dynamically. I've specified page breaks as true, which means Excel will insert page breaks into your spreadsheet after each group of data. I've specified summary below data as true as well, which means the subtotals are positioned below each data group. Now let's run this. And if you go to the worksheet and if you go to the second sheet, you will notice that the subtotals have been applied. Now let's say I do not want these page breaks, then simply go to the code and set the page break as false. Also, let's change this value as false as well. So this will now show the summary above the data, not below the data. So I'm going to run this again. And now let's click on the worksheet. So my page breaks have disappeared. The grand total has now gone up. Now let's see how we can remove the subtotals using VBA. For this, we have to use the range.remove subtotal method. The syntax is expression.remove subtotal. Well, expression is a variable that represents a range object. So let's go to module 3 and let's see what the code is doing there. Here I have declared the variable for my worksheet last row and the range. Here I have initialized the worksheet. Here I am finding the last row and here I am setting my range. Finally, I am removing the subtotal from the range using range.remove subtotal method. Let's run it and let's see if the subtotal is removed. If you go to the worksheet, you will see that the subtotals have disappeared. All the subtotal, grand total, everything is removed. Now let's understand how to create the total list array dynamically, which I mentioned in module 1. So let's check out the code in module 4. Here I have declared the variable for my worksheet last row and range. This variable is for my array, which I will use to set the columns to which the subtotals will be applied. Here I have initialized the worksheet. Here I am finding the last row. Here I am setting my range. And here I am removing the subtotal from the range. Now see this part carefully. This is where I have redeemed the array to hold 2 items. And here I am setting it to 5 and 7. Those are the columns where I want to apply the subtotal. If you're unsure how arrays work in VBA, then I recommend seeing the video VBA Array in Microsoft Excel 365 for Windows. Here I am applying the subtotal. This code is the same as module 1 except the total list parameter. In the total list parameter, now instead of passing array 5,7, I'm passing the dynamic array that I created. So let's run this code. If you go to the worksheet, you will see that the subtotal have been applied in relevant columns. So this is how you can create a dynamic array to handle the total list parameter. So if you wanted to also include the second column, then this would have been written call AR1 to 3. Call AR1 is equal to 2. Call AR2 is equal to 5. Call AR3 is equal to 7. And the rest of the code remains the same. So when you run the code, all the 3 columns will have subtotals. Now, let's see how we can have multiple subtotals. Let's go to module 5. This is the same code as we have in module 3, except this part. To add multiple subtotals, simply call the range.subtotal again. Just ensure that the replace is set as false. Otherwise, the new subtotal will replace the old subtotal. Here I am using average as the subtotal function and I am using it on the 6th column, which is price per unit. Let's go back. Since we are applying the second subtotal only on one single column, I am directly using array 6. If there were multiple columns, then I would have again used the same approach that I did here. Let's run this. Now if you go to the worksheet, you will see that the multiple subtotals have been applied. So here we have the total subtotals and here we have the average subtotals. Time for a quick recap. In this video, we understood about subtotals much more in detail. Not only did we understand about the subtotal function, but we also covered subtotal features. We saw how to add subtotal rows and grand total rows to the data to create some sort of a summary report. We also saw how to use the subtotal function to do basic calculations using common functions like add, average, etc. So if you have any questions regarding this video, feel free to leave a comment in the comment section below. Or you can also email me on support@teamexcel.com. I also have a Facebook page. The link is in the description below. Feel free to join that group. And if you have any questions, please post it there. I'll be more than happy to answer your query. Right. So if you like the kind of content that I'm putting up on this channel, and if you would like to extend support, then go ahead, watch a couple of videos, drop a couple of likes. And if you're really serious about learning Visual Basic Programming from scratch, then do check out the playlist because that is where I have kept the videos in a specific sequence. It will really help you out. So go ahead, watch those videos, drop a couple of likes there as well. And if you have still not subscribed to this channel, then go ahead and subscribe to this channel by clicking on the bell icon. In this video, I briefly spoke about grouping. So in the next video, I'm going to cover grouping much more in detail. So I'll see you soon.